We are back. You are chatting with John P. Today we are going to be talking about how effectively Hublot just became a Patek dealer. That's right. And I'll kind of tell you what I mean by that. But first, I'd like to thank you so much for coming back. Do not forget to like and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. You can find us at delraywatch.com, where we just posted a whole bunch of cool new things, including some very high-end pieces, including a very special Laurent Ferrier, if you're into that, as well as some more approachable pieces for the holiday season. And on my wrist today, I have the last generation of the ceramic bezel Omega Seamaster, and it's actually back on the bracelet, but I noticed because it's so cold here now in South Florida, comparatively to how it normally is, that it's actually pretty loose on the wrist. If you're not familiar with how this works, for those of you that are newbies out there, basically your wrist fluctuates in size when it's hot and it's cold, and it's 60 degrees here, I think, this morning, so it's certainly a lot colder than normal. So Hublot becomes a Patek dealer. Now, not quite. Let me explain. Recently, and I mean, this is breaking news, LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet, Hennessy just announced that they are purchasing Tiffany & Co. for $16.2 billion. Now, that's roughly $135 per share, which is much higher than what the share price was just recently. So those of you that had some stock there really had a pretty good payday coming soon. But nonetheless, yes, they announced it. The iconic jewelry store turned jewelry house and also Patek Philippe dealer is purchased by the luxury goods powerhouse LVMH. And of course, as the title says, LVMH owns Hublot, they own Zenith, and they own Tag Heuer, among many, many, many other luxury brands. But that's the staple wheelhouse of what they do in watchmaking. Now, there's many different interesting things that can be said about this. It's kind of interesting because recently there were some rumors that LVMH was going to be purchasing Patek Philippe, and I think the whole industry kind of went wild for a day or two before those myths were dispelled, and it's very interesting to see that LVMH, in fact, is purchasing Tiffany. Now, for those of you that are not too familiar, basically Tiffany has been kind of going a little bit more downstream as time has gone on. Tiffany was once this just incredible powerhouse, high-end luxury brand. And over time, they've kind of turned into a brand where, younger girls or girls that, have a much lower budget than where once the brand was positioned have been kind of targeted in that kind of way. So things in the couple $100 instead of couple thousands of dollars. Now, of course, they still have the very high-end pieces, but you've seen the brand over the last, especially decade, really become more approachable luxury, and that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother conversation. It's similar to what micro brands are doing with this whole concept of approachable luxury, is a lot where Tiffany kind of went with their brand. And of course, Tiffany does have Patek Philippe boutiques inside some of their stores. Now, it's interesting, right? Because you can walk in, you can buy a Patek Philippe. Certain models, other models, of course, like a 5711, are not available, but you can have the Tiffany name on the dial, and that's been a long-standing tradition. And also, you could have done that once upon a time with Rolex, but at a period of time, I believe in the 80s, that was kind of weaned out, and only Patek Philippe has kind of been left standing in the Tiffany stores. Now, Tiffany in recent times also has come out with some very interesting watches. While Tiffany has produced watches, or at least had watches produced for them with their name only exclusively on the dial, in the last couple of years, they've, in my opinion, come out with some very attractive chronographs, as well as some very attractive classic-looking, vintage-inspired driving watches where the face will kind of be on the side, so you can kind of see the time while your hand is up on the steering wheel. I really like their designs. There'll be a picture here. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. And so when we consider this, I think that in the coming years, and maybe even months, but likely the coming years, once that whole merge happens and things start trickling through and, people's jobs start becoming more solidified and that meshing of the brands and really starts to take place, I think we're going to see some very interesting things happen in the watch world related to Tiffany. The first thing is I think we're going to see Tiffany start using the El Primero movement in their chronographs. Now, Tiffany has chronographs, quartz driven as well as automatic, I think 7750, but it would only make sense for them to use the El Primero movement that Zenith uses, Hublot uses, and put it into some of their chronographs. I think that's incredibly interesting. And considering that I've actually held the Tiffany chronographs, I've held some of their other watches in their stores just out of curiosity, and the quality really is there. You know, some watch guys will say, oh, you know, this is a Tiffany watch. This isn't, you know, a watch guy's watch. I think if they put the El Primero movement inside this watch, a lot like they did with Concorde, and even like what they did with Movado once upon a time, I mean, we're talking decades ago, I think it delivers a lot of value for the guys that would look down on the Tiffany brand as being very entry level, very outside of the loop in terms of being a watch guy, because it's very easy to say that the El Primero is probably the most iconic chronograph movement and one of the most respected. Still to this day, it's being used since, you know, the 60s when it was invented. So that's what I think is going to happen with Tiffany's chronographs. Now, consider that Hublot uses a lot of precious stones and precious metals with their watches. It would only make sense, in my opinion, that LVMH starts using Tiffany stones in the Hublot watches. There's all different kinds of diamond-encrusted Hublot directly from the factory. It would be such an interesting marketing ploy, especially with a brand that's really been hurt recently. Hublot has really taken a back seat from where they once were in favor of celebrities going towards Richard Mille, Patek, and Rolex, of course. So to put something like Tiffany stones into a watch, considering it's under the same umbrella, the same family of companies, not only would it probably be very cost effective for them to do this in terms of being a good business strategic pricing move, but also it's a great marketing move. The reason that LVMH is purchasing Tiffany for more than their share prices, you know, overpaying for it, is because of the brand. There's something to be said about Tiffany, and it's just such a wide-reaching world brand that they're willing to pay more. So to put diamonds that are Tiffany diamonds into these Hublot watches, I think would be great for probably pricing, but definitely marketing. And another thing that I could easily see LVMH doing with Tiffany as well as some of their watch brands is I could see Tag Heuer easily put into the display cases at some of the Tiffany stores. Now, let me explain before some of you guys out there get a little bit too wrapped up in this. When people think of Tiffany, of course they think of luxury, but it's also many times an entryway into luxury and luxury jewelry. It's a really strong brand name, but they also have very approachable pieces. And a lot of that can be said about Tag Heuer as well. You go into the Tag Heuer boutique, they have watches that are quartz-driven, lower price, but then they also have tourbillons all the way at the top. So that's something that can be said about Tag Heuer as well. It's almost like a gateway into the watch industry, into becoming a watch guy. Oftentimes, Tag Heuer is viewed at that. So I see the two brands really positioned in a similar way. And when we consider that oftentimes guys are kind of brought into the store while they're looking for something for their girlfriend or their wife or some family member, or perhaps that lady or girl brought them into the store while they look at a few things, it would only make sense for them to have a little bit more masculine, a little bit more kind of popular watches for those guys to perhaps purchase in the stores at the Tiffany stores. Now, of course, Tiffany has the existing watches, the Tiffany line, but I'll say they're very classic, they're very elegant, and I don't want to necessarily use the word dainty, but for lack of a better word, they're very slim, dainty type watches. And to have something a little bit more masculine, a little bit more modern, like the Tag Heuers, I think could be a very interesting play from the LVMH company. So guys, my mind can just run endlessly with different little plays from within inside the brands, within inside the different fashion houses, luxury houses, on and on about different movements used here, different precious metals used here, different stones used here, but really I would love to hear what you have to say about this. First, what do you think about the sale price, right? 16.2 billion, absolutely amazing. What do you think about that? But also, do you see any kind of interesting pairings between the brands and Tiffany? I would love to hear your opinion on this as well. Of course, you can find me on Instagram, TheRealJohnP. You can find us at delraywatch.com, where we have a lot of cool things. And also, do not forget to like and subscribe because I really do appreciate it. Thanks, guys. You have been chatting with John P. Ciao.